My name is Elaine, 65 years old, and I never thought my Thanksgiving dinner would end up revealing the true colors of my daughter-in-law, Natalie. For 5 years, I've watched her slowly change my sweet Michael, but nothing prepared me for her announcing to my entire family that my house was actually hers. I had found some old property documents just days before that would prove her wrong. Before I tell you what happened that Thanksgiving, let me know where you're watching from, and tap that subscribe button if you want to see more stories about standing up for yourself when family tries to take advantage of you. I was married to my husband Robert for 40 years before he passed away 3 years ago. We built a beautiful life together on our 2-acre property with a main house and a separate guest house. Robert was the love of my life, my partner in everything. His death left a hole in my heart that will never completely heal, but I've been finding my way forward. During those 40 years together, I built a successful career as a real estate attorney. I'm semi-retired now, still consulting occasionally with my old firm when they have particularly complex cases. My expertise in property law would turn out to be unexpectedly valuable within my own family. My son Michael is 38, always been the sweetest soul. He takes after his father, thoughtful, kind, and genuinely cares about others. Or at least, that's who he was before he lost his job in the tech industry 6 months ago. The layoffs hit his company hard, and despite his talents, the industry was contracting everywhere. That job loss changed something in him. Then there's Natalie, my daughter-in-law of 5 years. When Michael first introduced her to us, she was charming, vivacious, and seemed to adore my son. Robert and I were thrilled, but looking back, I see the warning signs I missed. The designer clothes that stretched their budget. The constant comparing of what they had to what her friends owned. The subtle digs at our quaint family traditions. After Michael lost his job, their financial strain became obvious. Their luxury apartment in the city, the new car Natalie had insisted on leasing, their lavish vacations. None of it was sustainable on just her income as a pharmaceutical sales representative. When Michael suggested they move into our guest house temporarily to save money, I readily agreed. What mother wouldn't want to help her son during a rough patch? My daughter Amanda, who's 40, lives across town with her husband Jake and their 2 children. Unlike Michael and Natalie, they've built a steady, modest life. Amanda saw through Natalie from the beginning, but kept her opinions mostly to herself out of respect for her brother's choice. Still, whenever she visited after they moved into the guest house, she would give me these looks when Natalie would say certain things. The property that became such a point of contention has been in our family for 35 years. Robert and I bought it when the children were small, dreaming of family gatherings, exactly like the Thanksgiving that would eventually go so wrong. The main house is a large 4-bedroom colonial, and the guest house is a cozy 2-bedroom structure about 50 yards away. Robert was always meticulous about our finances and legal arrangements, something I appreciated during our marriage, but would come to value even more after his passing. Almost immediately after moving in, Natalie began acting as though the guest house was beneath her standards. She complained about the appliances, the fixtures, even the paint colors, all of which were relatively new. She began suggesting renovations, dropping hints about how the property could be improved if they were to stay long-term. There were smaller incidents that should have been red flags, like the time I spent all day making my special lasagna for a family dinner, only to hear Natalie telling Amanda's children, "I'm so glad you like the lasagna I made. It's an old family recipe I tweaked." Or when she referred to my mother's antique vase as outdated junk we should really replace, when she thought I couldn't hear. Most concerning was watching Michael gradually change under her influence. My son, who once called me several times a week, now seemed to check with Natalie before agreeing to even a casual lunch with me. He became quieter at family gatherings, his eyes constantly darting to Natalie as if gauging her reactions. The confident young man was being replaced by someone who second-guessed himself constantly. I tried, telling myself I was overreacting, that all marriages go through adjustments, that losing his job had affected his self-esteem. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. As November approached, I was especially excited about hosting Thanksgiving. The previous year, I had been recovering from pneumonia, and we'd had a subdued celebration at Amanda's house. This year would be different. I wanted the full family gathering in our traditional setting. I threw myself into the preparations weeks in advance. Thanksgiving was always Robert's favorite holiday, and continuing our traditions was my way of keeping him with us. I polished the silver serving platters we'd received as wedding gifts. I dug out the handwritten recipe cards for his mother's famous cornbread stuffing and my own mother's cranberry relish. I ordered a 20-pound turkey from the local farm that had been our supplier for decades. The guest list included 15 people, Amanda and Jake with their children, Robert's brother Thomas and his wife Carol, Robert's sister Catherine and her husband Paul, Natalie's parents Gerald and Diane, and of course Michael and Natalie from the guest house. A full table, just as Robert and I had always loved. From the moment I announced my Thanksgiving plans, Natalie began inserting herself into every aspect of the preparations. At first, I welcomed her interest, thinking it might be a way for us to bond. But it quickly became clear that she wasn't offering to help. She was attempting to take control. "The dining room layout won't work for that many people," she declared, despite the fact we'd hosted larger gatherings many times. "We should move everything to the living room. Those place settings are so outdated," she commented, while I was unpacking my holiday china. "I have some modern ones we could use instead." 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, I overheard a conversation that sent a chill through me. I had gone to the guest house to drop off some mail that had been delivered to the main house. The door was slightly ajar, and I could hear Michael and Natalie's voices raised in what sounded like an argument. "You need to ask her," Natalie was saying firmly. "It's been 6 months, and we need more security than just staying here at her convenience. She's my mother, Nat. She's being incredibly generous, letting us live here, rent-free, while I job hunt," Michael responded, sounding tired. "And she's sitting on a gold mine. This property must be worth at least $2 million now. All I'm saying is that we should have some guarantee, some ownership stake. You're her son. Surely she intends to leave it to you anyway. She'll leave it to both Amanda and me, I'm sure. But that's hopefully a long way off. And it's not something I want to think about, much less discuss with her." "Well, I'm thinking about it," Natalie snapped. "We could sell this place, buy something more suitable for us, and still have plenty left over. You need to man up and have this conversation with her." I quietly backed away, my mail delivery forgotten. That night, I couldn't sleep. The conversation kept replaying in my mind. Was Natalie really pushing my son to ask for part ownership of my home? A home that Robert and I had worked decades to pay. For that held all our memories. The next day, I went to the storage room where Robert kept all our important documents. There was something I needed to check. A conversation from years ago that I needed to confirm. After an hour of searching through meticulously organized files, I found what I was looking for: the trust documents Robert had set up before his cancer diagnosis. I called Martin, Robert's best friend, and our family attorney, who had helped establish the trust. "Elaine, Everything is exactly as Robert set it up, Martin reassured me after reviewing the documents. The property is held in the family trust. You have full rights to it for your lifetime. After your passing, it transfers equally to Michael and Amanda. There are no provisions for their spouses to have any direct ownership. And Michael can't transfer his future inheritance or make claims on it now. Absolutely not. His interest only vests during your lifetime. Until then, you have sole control. That conversation gave me peace of mind legally. But emotionally, I was still troubled. Should I confront Michael about what I'd overheard? Should I talk to Natalie directly? In the end, I decided to wait until after Thanksgiving. I didn't want to spoil the holiday with confrontation. The week before Thanksgiving, Amanda stopped by to help me prepare some dishes in advance. As we worked side by side in the kitchen, she gently broached the subject. "Mom, is everything okay with Michael and Natalie? They seem different lately." I considered deflecting, but decided my daughter deserved honesty. I told her about the conversation I'd overheard, though not about checking the trust documents. Amanda wasn't surprised. "I've noticed how Natalie looks at this house, Mom, like she's mentally redecorating it already. And Michael just goes along with whatever she says now. He's vulnerable after losing his job," I said, trying to be fair. "His confidence is shaken." "Maybe," Amanda replied, unconvinced. "Or maybe she's taking advantage of that vulnerability. Just be careful, Mom, and know that Jake and I have your back always." As Thanksgiving approached, the tension was palpable whenever Natalie and I were in the same room. She had begun referring to the guest house as our cottage and the property as the family estate, in a way that made ownership ambiguous. I caught her showing her mother pictures of the main house, pointing out walls she would definitely knock down to open up the space. I tried to focus on the holiday itself, on creating the warm, loving environment that had always defined our family gatherings. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was building, like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Thanksgiving morning dawned bright and clear, one of those perfect late November days with crisp air and golden sunlight. I was up before 6, sliding the turkey into the oven and beginning the choreographed dance of preparing multiple dishes, timed to be ready together. Michael came over early to help, a glimmer of his old self showing as he took over mashing the potatoes the way his father had always done. Natalie appeared later, immaculately dressed in a designer outfit that seemed excessive for a family dinner, especially one that involved cooking. "The table looks so rustic," she commented, managing to make it sound like an insult rather than the compliment I think she intended it to be. Amanda and her family arrived around noon, her children immediately filling the house with energy and laughter. Jake jumped in to help Michael with the last-minute preparations, while Amanda and I put finishing touches on the table settings. By 3 o'clock, everyone had arrived. Thomas and Carol brought their famous pecan pies. Catherine and Paul arrived with bottles of excellent wine. Natalie's parents, Gerald and Diane, seemed slightly uncomfortable. This was only their second Thanksgiving with our family, and I sensed they were still finding their footing in our established traditions. Gerald, a successful business owner himself, had always been respectful and pleasant in our limited interactions. Diane was quieter, seemingly dominated by her daughter's bigger personality. Watching them, I sometimes wondered how they had raised someone as entitled as Natalie. The early part of the gathering went smoothly. We enjoyed appetizers in the living room, the children played games in the den, and the men discussed the football games scheduled for later. There was laughter, warm conversations, the clinking of glasses, exactly the atmosphere I had hoped to create. When it was time to eat, we all gathered around the dining table, extended to its full length and supplemented with a smaller table for the children. The turkey was golden brown and succulent, surrounded by all the traditional sides. Before we began eating, I offered the toast that had been our tradition since Robert and I first hosted Thanksgiving as newlyweds. To family, those present, those no longer with us, and those who will join us in years to come. May we always find our way back to this table and to each other. Everyone raised their glasses, and for a moment, I felt Robert's presence so strongly, I almost looked for him at the other end of the table. We began passing dishes, filling plates, complimenting the food. It was perfect, until Natalie cleared her throat and tapped her water glass with a spoon. "Since we're all together," she began, her voice carrying that artificial sweetness I'd come to recognize as a warning sign. "Michael and I wanted to announce some household changes." Michael looked startled, his fork pausing halfway to his mouth. Whatever was coming, it clearly wasn't something they had discussed. Natalie continued, seemingly oblivious to his reaction. "As you know, we've been managing the property for the past 6 months. This was news to me. They had been living in the guest house, not managing anything. We've decided that it's time to put the property on a more sustainable financial footing. From January, we'll be instituting a usage fee for anyone staying overnight in the guest quarters." The table had gone quiet. Everyone's attention now focused on Natalie. Even the children sensed something was happening and stopped their chatter. "The fee will be $2,500 per night," she announced, as casually as if discussing the weather. "This is actually below market rate for comparable properties in this area, so we're still giving family a significant discount." I saw Amanda's jaw literally drop. Jake put a steadying hand on her arm. Thomas and Catherine exchanged alarmed glances. Natalie's own father frowned deeply. "Natalie, what are you talking about?" Michael finally found his voice, looking mortified. She turned to him with a tight smile. "We discussed this, honey. The property needs to generate income, and family has been taking advantage far too long." Then she looked around the table and delivered the line that would change everything. "Your free ride is over. Pay rent or leave my house." The silence that followed was absolute. Every face registered shock, except for Natalie's, which showed only smug satisfaction. Gerald looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. Diane had gone pale. Amanda was gripping her napkin so tightly, her knuckles were white. After what seemed like an eternity, but was probably only seconds, all eyes turned to me. I could feel the weight of their gazes, questioning, concerned, waiting to see how I would respond to this stunning display of audacity. I carefully placed my napkin beside my plate and stood up slowly. The room seemed to hold its collective breath. "Let me clarify something here," I began, my voice steadier than I expected it to be. I looked directly at Natalie as I spoke 5 simple words. "This is not your house." The silence in the room deepened. I could practically hear everyone's heartbeats. "Excuse me, but Michael and I have been managing the property," Natalie began, but I held up my hand. "Please wait here," I said calmly. "I need to get something." I walked to my study, my legs somehow carrying me, despite feeling slightly numb from the adrenaline. From my desk drawer, I retrieved the folder containing the trust documents I had reviewed with Martin. When I returned to the dining room, everyone was sitting exactly as I had left them, like a tableau frozen in time. After my husband Robert passed away, I began, my voice gaining strength as I spoke. Many of you knew that he had put certain arrangements in place to protect our family assets. What you may not know are the specific details of those arrangements. I opened the folder and removed the key document. This property, both the main house and the guest house, are held in the Robert and Elaine Montgomery Family Trust. As the surviving trustee, I have sole legal right to the property during my lifetime. I looked directly at Michael, whose expression was shifting from embarrassment to confusion. Upon my death, the property transfers equally to Michael and Amanda, not before. Turning back to Natalie, whose face had gone from smugly confident to alarmingly red, I continued, neither Michael nor any spouse has any current ownership claim to this property. There is no circumstance under which you have the authority to charge anyone for staying here. This is my home, and these are my guests. Natalie shot to her feet. But Michael told me that he inherited part of the property when his father died. All eyes turned to Michael, who looked genuinely shocked. I never said that, Nat. Never. I told you my parents had always planned to leave the property to Amanda and me someday. But I never claimed to own any part of it now. Gerald, Natalie's father, cleared his throat. Elaine, I want to apologize for this misunderstanding. I had no idea Natalie was under this impression. There's no misunderstanding, Natalie snapped. We've been living here maintaining the place. That creates rights. I couldn't help but smile slightly at that. Actually, as a real estate attorney with 35 years of experience, I can assure you that it doesn't. Especially when there's a formal written agreement, which you both signed, clearly stating that your residence in the guest house is temporary and at my discretion. I hadn't wanted to mention the agreement had hoped it would never be relevant, but Natalie's behavior had forced my hand. Gerald spoke again, his business acumen evident in his understanding of the situation. Natalie, enough. You're embarrassing yourself and us. Elaine has been incredibly generous, allowing you both to stay in her guest house rent-free. Natalie looked around the table, seemingly expecting someone to defend her. When no one did, she pushed back her chair forcefully. This is ridiculous. I'm not staying here to be humiliated. She grabbed her purse and stomped toward the door. Everyone's eyes followed her, then returned to Michael, who sat looking torn. Michael, she called from the entryway. We're leaving, now. My son looked at me, then at Natalie, then back to me. I saw years of manipulation in his hesitation, but also the first spark of resistance. I'm staying, Nat, he said quietly. We'll talk later, but I'm having Thanksgiving with my family. The sound of the front door slamming echoed through the house. In its wake came a collective exhale from everyone at the table. Mom, I'm so sorry. Michael began, his voice thick with emotion. I had no idea she was thinking any of this. I swear. We'll discuss it later, I said gently. Right now, let's try to salvage our Thanksgiving. Diane, Natalie's mother, looked miserable. Elaine, we should probably go. Absolutely not, I insisted. You are my guests, and you're welcome here. What just happened isn't your fault. Slowly, awkwardly, the meal resumed. Conversation was stilted at first, but gradually recovered as the initial shock wore off. Catherine, bless her heart, began reminiscing about Thanksgivings from our childhood, and the stories brought laughter and warmth back to the table. Throughout the remainder of the meal, I caught Michael watching me with new eyes, as if seeing me clearly for the first time in years. I also noticed the subtle shifts in everyone's behavior, the increased deference to my opinions, the gentle solicitude. I had stood my ground, and they had witnessed it. What should have been a joyful family holiday had become something else entirely. I felt a complex mixture of emotions, sadness at the conflict, relief at having finally confronted the situation and an underlying anxiety about what would come next. But beneath it all was something unexpected, a sense of my own strength that I hadn't fully recognized until that moment. After the guests departed, the house felt unnaturally quiet. Amanda had offered to stay and help clean up, but I encouraged her to take her tired children home, assuring her I'd be fine. Michael had retreated to the guest house shortly after Natalie's parents left, promising to return later to talk. I was loading the dishwasher when he reappeared, looking exhausted and about 10 years older than he had that morning. "She's not answering her phone," he said, without preamble, sinking into a kitchen chair. "I have no idea where she went." I wiped my hands and sat across from him. "Michael, I need you to be honest with me now. How long has Natalie been talking about the property this way?" He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of his father that it made my heart ache. "It started about a month after we moved in. At first, it was just comments about how we could help you manage the property. Then it evolved into discussions about how I should have inherited Dad's share when he passed. And you never corrected her understanding. I tried, Mom. I told her that Dad and you owned everything jointly, and that neither Amanda nor I would inherit until after you're gone, which I hope is many, many years from now." His voice cracked slightly. "But she just kept pushing, saying that wasn't fair, that I deserved part of my inheritance. Now that you were being selfish, hoarding all this property. Why didn't you come talk to me?" "Because it was humiliating," he admitted. "My wife was basically plotting how to get her hands on my parents' home, while my mother was graciously letting us live in her guest house, rent-free. What kind of man does that make me?" We talked for hours that night, delving into the patterns of his relationship with Natalie, how she had gradually isolated him from friends who didn't meet her approval, how she had pushed for an ever-increasing lifestyle that stretched their finances to the breaking point, how his job loss had triggered a fundamental shift in their power dynamic. Around midnight, Natalie finally returned. I heard the door of the guest house slam, followed shortly by raised voices. Michael looked at me apologetically and headed back to deal with the situation. The next day brought a new level of tension. Natalie refused to come to the main house or speak to me directly. Michael shuttled between us, looking increasingly worn down. I was in my garden when I heard the sound of breaking glass from inside the house. I rushed in to find Natalie standing in my living room. Beside her lay the shattered remains of my mother's antique crystal vase. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she said, not sounding sorry at all. It was just so precariously placed. The vase had been in the same spot for 20 years. There was nothing precarious about its placement. "I think it's best if you don't enter the main house again, without my explicit invitation," I said evenly, already kneeling to carefully gather the shards. "Are you accusing me of breaking it on purpose?" She feigned outrage. "Michael, are you going to let her speak to me this way?" Michael, who had followed the sound of breaking glass as well, looked between us. For once, he didn't immediately jump to Natalie's defense. "Nat, that was my grandmother's vase. It survived 2 moves and decades of family gatherings without incident. So you're taking her side against your wife?" Natalie's voice rose dangerously. "There are no sides," Michael said wearily. "Just facts." Over the next week, the situation deteriorated further. I overheard Natalie on her phone in the garden apparently consulting with someone about how to contest a family trust. When Michael was out job hunting, she attempted to access my home office, claiming she needed to borrow a pen. When I caught her, Michael seemed caught in an impossible position, torn between loyalty to his wife and growing awareness of her true nature. He began spending more time in the main house, often arriving early in the morning with the excuse of having breakfast with me. I suspected he was avoiding Natalie. Amanda called or visited daily, concerned about the situation. During one of her visits, while the children played in the yard, she confided, "Mom, Jake and I were talking. We think you should ask them to leave. This situation isn't healthy for anyone, especially you." I had been considering the same thing, but hesitated to act. "He's my son, Amanda. I can't just throw him out." "You wouldn't be throwing Michael out," she pointed out. "You'd be setting a boundary with Natalie. Michael is welcome to make his own choice about what that means for him." After much thought and a consultation with Martin, I drafted a formal letter giving Michael and Natalie 30 days' notice to find alternative accommodation. It was the hardest thing I'd ever written, but I knew it was necessary. The current situation was untenable, and enabling it further would only postpone the inevitable confrontation. When I handed Michael the letter, his face fell, but he nodded in understanding. "I'll start looking for apartments right away." "Michael," I said gently, "the letter is addressed to both you and Natalie. What you do next is your choice." His eyes met mine, confusion giving way to comprehension. I was offering him an option, one I couldn't state explicitly, but that he understood nonetheless. Natalie's reaction to the notice was explosive. She stormed into the main house, waving the letter and screaming about family loyalty, ingratitude, and her intention to contest everything legally. "Go ahead," I said calmly. I spent 35 years practicing real estate law. My late husband was a financial planner who ensured everything was legally airtight. But if you want to waste money on legal fees, trying to claim property that isn't yours, that's your prerogative. That evening, I heard the most heated argument yet from the guest house. Though I couldn't make out the specific words, the tone was unmistakable. Something was reaching a breaking point. The next morning, Michael appeared at my door, looking simultaneously devastated and relieved. "She wanted me to suggest we sell some of Dad's watches," he said without preamble, "to tide us over until we can sort out the property situation." I waited, sensing there was more. "I finally accessed our joint credit card statements," he continued. "She has over $30,000 in debt I knew nothing about. Designer clothes, jewelry, a secret membership at an exclusive spa. That's why she's been so desperate about the property. She's been telling her creditors we're about to come into a significant inheritance." The final confrontation happened that evening. I was reading in my living room when Michael burst in, a small suitcase in hand. "She's given me an ultimatum," he said, his voice steady, despite the emotion in his eyes. "She says I have to choose between you and her. That if I really loved her, I'd fight you for our share of the property." "And?" I asked softly. "And I chose my family, my real family, the people who love me for who I am, not what I can provide." He set down the suitcase. "Would it be okay if I stayed in the blue bedroom for a while? Just until I figure out next steps." I embraced my son for the first time in what felt like ages. "You can stay as long as you need." Natalie moved out the next day, going to her parents' home, according to Michael. He remained in the guest house, saying he needed some space to process everything. I respected his need for independence, while keeping the door to the main house always open for him. My feelings in the aftermath were complicated. Relief that the situation had been resolved, guilt over my role in the dissolution of my son's marriage, concern for his emotional well-being. But underlying it all was a certainty that I had done what needed to be done. A week after Natalie's departure, I received an unexpected visitor. Gerald, Natalie's father, appeared at my door looking uncomfortable but determined. "Elaine, I owe you an apology," he began when I invited him in for coffee. "And an explanation, though it doesn't excuse anything." Over the next hour, he revealed a pattern of behavior I found all too familiar. Natalie had pulled similar maneuvers with previous boyfriends, always seeking financial advantages. Her parents had enabled her for years, bailing her out of debt and smoothing over relationships she'd damaged. But this time, they were stepping back. "She needs to face consequences," Gerald said firmly. "We love our daughter, but we don't like who she's become. Michael is a good man. He deserved better." As the weeks passed, I began to see glimpses of the son I remembered. Michael started joining Amanda's family for their weekly game nights again, something he'd stopped doing years ago. He found a therapist who specialized in codependent relationships and emotional abuse. And most importantly, he began interviewing for new jobs, his confidence slowly rebuilding. One evening, my phone rang with Natalie's number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Elaine." Her voice was honeyed in a way that immediately put me on guard. "I think we got off on the wrong foot. I've had time to reflect, and I realize we can work this out. Michael misses me. I know he does. If you could just speak to him." "Natalie," I interrupted firmly, "Michael is an adult who makes his own decisions. If he wanted to reconcile with you, he knows where to find you. As for our relationship, I think it's best if we communicate through lawyers from now on." "You turned him against me," she hissed, the pleasant facade dropping instantly. "You'll regret this, Elaine. I'll make sure of it." "Goodbye, Natalie," I said, ending the call and blocking her number. It wasn't the last attempt she would make to reinsert herself into our lives, but it was the last time I engaged directly. Some bridges once burned should remain crossed. 3 months after that disastrous Thanksgiving dinner, our family had found a new equilibrium. Michael had secured a position at a smaller tech company, one with a more sustainable business model and humane work culture. His starting salary was less than his previous job, but as he pointed out, so was the stress level. He had found a modest apartment in the city, close to his new office. I helped him furnish it, enjoying the process of setting up his new independent life. We were careful to make it entirely his space, with no traces of Natalie's influence. The day he signed the lease, he looked both terrified and exhilarated, exactly as he had on his first day of kindergarten all those years ago. The divorce proceedings were underway, complicated by Natalie's attempts to claim assets that weren't hers. But Michael had excellent legal representation, courtesy of my former colleagues, and a newfound strength that allowed him to stand firm against her manipulations. Our mother-son relationship had been transformed through honest conversations about the difficult years. Michael apologized repeatedly for not seeing what was happening, for allowing Natalie to disrespect me in my own home. "You were in love," I told him. "We all have blind spots when it comes to the people we love." "I don't think it was love," he reflected. "Not real love. It was dependency and fear and not wanting to admit I'd made a mistake. Real love doesn't make you smaller or cut you off from the people who care about you." His insight made me proud. The healing wasn't instantaneous or linear. He had good days and bad days, but the trajectory was unmistakably positive. Amanda had become an even more regular presence in my life, bringing her children over several times a week. We established a tradition of Sunday family dinners, providing stability and continuity for all of us. Michael rarely missed these gatherings, often bringing interesting dishes he was learning to cook as part of his self-rediscovery. Natalie made one attempt to return, showing up unannounced at the main house one Saturday when Michael was visiting. He, Amanda, Jake, and I presented a united front, calmly but firmly, refusing to engage with her emotional tactics. After 30 minutes of escalating drama that failed to produce her desired result, she left, and we didn't hear from her directly again. The experience changed me too. Robert's death had left me adrift in many ways, uncertain of my place in the world without him. The confrontation with Natalie, while painful, had forced me to find my voice again, to stand firmly in my own authority. I was not just Robert's widow or Michael and Amanda's mother. I was Elaine, with my own strength and boundaries. I made some practical changes as well. With Martin's help, I updated the family trust to include additional protections. While I still intended for the property to pass equally to my children, I added provisions to ensure neither could be coerced into relinquishing their inheritance and specified that the property could not be sold without mutual agreement for at least 5 years after my passing. The deeper lesson for me was about recognizing when helping becomes enabling. My desire to support Michael had initially blinded me to the unhealthy dynamics in his marriage. By finally setting clear boundaries, I had actually given him the space to recognize his own worth and make healthier choices. As for Michael, his most profound realization came during a Sunday dinner about 6 months after Thanksgiving. Amanda's children were playing in the yard, the adults lingering over coffee and dessert, when he suddenly said, "I understand now what Dad was trying to protect with the trust. It wasn't just the property or the money, it was us, our family connection. Some things are worth more than their market value." 1 year after the Thanksgiving confrontation, we gathered again around the same table. The guest list was smaller, just Amanda's family, Michael and me. Michael had brought a friend, Kelly, from his new workplace. It wasn't romantic. He was nowhere near ready for a new relationship. But it was the first new friendship he'd formed in years without Natalie's approval, and that felt significant. As we prepared to eat, Michael asked if he could offer the toast. Surprised and touched, I nodded. He raised his glass and looked around the table. To family, who love us for who we are, not what we have, who tell us the hard truths when we need to hear them, and who welcome us back always when we lose our way. I couldn't have said it better myself. Have you ever had to set a difficult boundary with family? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength in unexpected places. Thank you for listening, and remember, true family supports your growth, not your limitations.